Hi, it's Pete the Bumbling Modeller. I'm back again with part 2 of the Type 42 Destroyer. So if you've just stumbled on this by accident, it's part of a playlist, a multi-part playlist, and it'll go on for quite some time. So, since we've last looked at this, I've sanded back the filler I've put on the hull and just given it a little squirt of primer. Oopsie, left that in there. Little squirt of primer just to check for lines, and that bit in the bar is blended in quite nicely. It wasn't a problem, wasn't a massive seam line there. It's just that's such a complicated shape. There's a small step and it just needed a bit of smoothing in. Same on the stern there, which I think the step there and a slight step in the hull was my problem, not the kit's problem. So I've done that and I've started to prime and paint some bits so I can start to sling this together quite quickly, relatively speaking. So first off, we mixed a special colour for the hull grey, and I wasn't sure what the light grey was meant to be, but looking online they say the best way to do it is if we have 5 parts flat white, which is Tamiya XF2, to 1 part light grey, which is Tamiya FX66, and just 1 drop of medium blue XF18, and that gives you a sort of grey with a bluey tinge. I don't know if you can pick it up that easily, but if you compare that to the primer, it's got a sort of vague bluish hint to it. I can see it off camera, I don't know if you can see it on camera. So I've mixed enough of that up to spray the hull and beyond. I did deviate slightly partly because I've run out of flat white, so I used 3 parts flat white and 2 parts gloss white, and I was hoping it'd give a bit of a satin sheen, although that wasn't the reason I did it. And it has. It has given it a slight shine, because these things aren't a matte, they are a sort of semi-gloss, so they're easier to wash salt and grime off them. So I've got some paint ready to go. I've tightened up this bit here where I dropped it and split it. It was still a bit baggy with the plastic had stretched, so I've cut it again and re-glued it, and that's far better. So that's that. And in terms of painting this, I was just debating it with myself, but I think what I'll probably do is spray the upper part of the hull the navy grey in a minute. Then we can get all this sort of gubbins in there. After that, I'll spray the deck grey and then join them together. Because the fit is quite good apart from where I dropped it at the back, and I think you can probably get away with that. But there is meant to be a very thin light grey line around the deck, so if I do it that way and I'm careful with the glue to hold this deck down, that should be fine, and you'll get that light grey line. If you don't, I'll have to mask it and spray it anyway, so I haven't lost anything by doing it that way. And then I can mask off these individual bits that are meant to be a light grey as and when, and fit things together. So other things I've done, the deck, the bridge, if you remember, was a clear part, so I sprayed that a grey, so the inside, if you're looking in through the windows, you see a grey inside it. Then it's not my idea, I've borrowed it off another modeller who was saying if you're spraying clear bits, spray the inside colour so when you look through you see the grey you want. Then spray it with the black, because that stops any light getting through at all, so you lose that vague translucence. Then work on that, so it's more long-winded, but I've sprayed this grey, sprayed it black, and I'm going to prime it again because all this is going to be primed in Mr. Surfacer before it's sprayed grey. Then there won't be any tonal difference between this and the rest of the boat. Then I'll spray it grey. So it's a 3-stage process, but it means things like this radome will be the same colour when you've done, in theory. So that needs to go into primer next, and at the same time I shall prime the hull and potentially the deck. I've got to be a bit careful of this bit, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then I've just been joining bits together and checking for gaps. So the funnel had a slight gap here, but again, I think that was where I took it off the sprue. So that's just been filled with Mr. Surfacer 500, which is not on my desk. You can probably see, oh, there it is. So it's just a thick paint really, and it was only a very small hairline crack or gap. So that now, if we give that a quick buff, that should disappear. And it's soft enough we won't damage the plastic, and everything will be compatible. I'll do this off camera, but you get the idea. So that's things like that I've just been generally putting together. Showing these going together is a bit tricky because they're so small and fiddly, so you won't see much of it, you'll just see finished articles. The other thing I've been using a lot of is these AK markers. So areas under the funnel, you want black when you see down. So rather than painting and getting paintbrushes and washing it all out, I've just been giving it a quick zip round. And it's so much less hassle than opening paint, getting a paintbrush, finding a paintbrush that isn't worn out in my case, then washing it when you finish. You can just colour it in. So jobs like this, I'm really liking these AK markers. So that's that done. That needs a bit of tidying up. Primer. And these Superstructure bits, I've been pondering this quite a bit as well. Now I think I'm better doing things counterintuitively. Normally you'd spray the light colour, then spray the dark over, so it takes less to do it. But I think I'm better off spraying these decks to dark grey than spraying the light grey down the sides. And my reasoning for that is these are large flat slabs and it's quite easy to mask these accurately, whereas the sides got all lumps and bumps and knobbles on it. So to try and mask that would be comparatively difficult. And there's also things like the photo-etched doors to go on there, and the masking tape would just rip them off if you're not careful. So although it's counterintuitive, I think I'm going to go dark to light so I can get the decks done. Once the decks are done, bits just drop on there, and we've got little bits sticking up here we can just touch in with a brush. So we'll be doing that. And my next thing to do is to get this little insert that goes in the back finished. Once that's done, and with the hull sprayed, I won't have to worry about too much about masking that. So that'll go in there. There's some bollards and bits and pieces to go in there. Then a photo-etched handrail which goes around the back here, which is quite distinctive on a Type 42. So we need to get that done. So that's all reinforced my idea of getting the deck, putting a thin seam of glue down there, dropping the deck on when this is all sprayed grey. Then I've got no chance of getting overspray in that area. Bollards and hawsers and things on HMS Coventry seem to be painted white, so I've just got some white and put a little bit of blue in it, so it's just gone off white. But they are quite glossy, because I only had a gloss white, so those probably need another spray with a satin They're a bit too vibrant, so that'll be done. And then I'm going to stop talking because this has gone on for 10 minutes. I'm not saying anything, and you want to see some action, not see some chat. So we'll end this bit here, and then we'll come back together when this rear bit's together. Oh, that's the other thing that's worthy of note on this kit. I mean, it's a £35 kit, which isn't, in my mind, massively dear, but it's not cheap. But it's even got little things like this little photo etched ladder. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it'll even zoom into that. Which joins this little deck to the back, to the helicopter deck. Now, I'll say, I think it was just under £40 to buy the kit. I'm trying to put it down without crushing it now. I wish I hadn't picked it up. Where's my tweezers? £40 isn't an insignificant amount of money, but it has literally everything: ladders, handrails, doors. You don't have to buy anything else on this kit to get it to go together and look quite decent. So you need to kind of compare like for like, but I would say this equates to a kit twice the price that hasn't got the same level of detail, but that's just personal opinion. So I'll stop waffling, I'll get some painting done, and then we'll move on from there. So I'll be back soon, and hopefully the hull will be the navy grey, and the little insert will be in the back. Again, too fiddly to do on camera. And then the other thing I've got to decide is what wash to use to bring out some of this detail. I think it needs to be darkish so you can see it, but not so dark that it dominates the grey. So it's going to be a bit of a tricky one, that, but we'll figure that out together on camera. So I'm going to leave it there. I'll be back soon. Okay, back to the Type 42. So what have we done? The hull, I've sprayed the Royal Navy grey down to about the waterline. There's going to be a black boot cap down there, so whatever, because I've got a limited amount of that, and it's a homemade paint, I'm only spraying part way down, so that's all right. So we're ready to move on a bit. I think that was going to be the best way, so need to, that way I don't have to worry about masking any of this. And I've looked at the deck, and that's had a coat of the deck grey, but around here there's some marks from a previous layer of primer, some shiny bits that you can see in the light. So I'm going to give the forward end of this another coat just to smarten that up a bit. I don't like those blotches. Back's all right. And then we'll need to carefully mask around these features and give them the navy grey spray on top. But this, while I've gone this way, that does fit on there quite nicely. And you get the grey, light grey edge all the way around there. You can't necessarily pick up on that bagginess. So I think the best way is to do that and then just touch in. I might put a few blobs of glue on the inner edges of these ribs to hold it in. But if I carefully touch in a bit of extra thin in some strategic areas, like in these gaps here, that'll tack this deck down and it won't mark the paint surface. So I won't need to, that'll be completely painted and ready for deckling, so we'll be okay with that. The clear upper hull, upper superstructure, sorry, for want of a better word, I've, as you saw, I painted a grey primer, then I painted it black to seal everything in so no light could get through. Then I've gone over it with a grey primer again, and I've done that so it's the same grey as the rest of the superstructure, or it will be, so that when it gets painted, it's going to be, there's going to be no mismatching colour. So we've gone down that road with that, and that's all right. This rear drop-in part is ready to go. It's got the deck grey and the navy grey, so we'll have to put that in sort of nowish once we put all the features on it. Then we've got some handrails to go around the back here, which I'll have to put in and spray before we put the deck on. And a photo etched, it's going to be a bit fiddly and this needs a wash. And because it's so dark and dingy in there, I was going to go a bit darker than normally would and use a dark panel wash. Same on the underside of here. We can see how dark it is. Because you're not really going to see it, I wouldn't go that dark as a general rule. Fine camera, yeah. On the main external bits of superstructure, but because I say this is such a hidden away area, and I may be wrong to do this, this may look awful, in which case it's yet another respray before it goes on. But I won't put this on before it's dried so we can see what it looks like. But I'll hit this with a bit of cotton bud as well later on. I just wanted these things to stand out, particularly that hatch, because there's a ladder goes in there. Not sure what this hatch is for. It might be a vent actually, I don't know. If we were to, although that looks extreme and needs a bit tidying up, if we were to put that on now as it should be, when you look up you can see there's some sort of detail in there because I've gone so over the top with a wash, but it's not doesn't look over the top. If I did that on the top surface it'd look awful, so it is only can be on the underside to do that. And we need to clean up where I've gone a bit crazy with it. So that's that done. We can always clean it later, as I say. And the other area is this rear bulkhead. I want those doors to stand out a little bit and the features on that. Just touch into these little bits so you can see there's some sort of detail. Around the actual rims of these doors, I don't mind if it's a bit heavier, so you can see they are doors. The ledge here, which will be quite dark. Again, tied up with a paintbrush and a cotton bud later on, I think, is the answer. There's bits on the deck, we'll just give them a little touch. Well, that's those done. Now I don't know if I mentioned this on the previous, I've lost a bit, have I? On the previous bit of chat, but it turns out on the Coventry deck fittings like these hawsers are a white colour, so I've mixed this slightly off white and then I've sanded it down. But there is another bit that goes on there that's grey, some sort of bollardy thing. Oh yeah, there we go. So that'll need, don't have to do it now. I want to put it on, let's do it now. That'll need a bit of a touch there to bring out the detail in the cabling on that winch. So that'll help that along. And I've got a couple of, I think, the navigation lights to glue on the back, these tiny little fellas. There's no way I'm going to attempt that on camera. I've kept them on the sprue because they are handed and I need to know the number, but they glue into little notches here, so I'll have to get those on nowish before I put the top on. So I'll do the little detail bits. There's a little ladder somewhere in this box of goodies. Yeah, there's a little ladder here. Where's my tweezers? Oh, there you are. It's a little ladder there that joins the main, from this hatch to the main deck down to here. It's awkward to see how that runs, so I think I probably need to get this deck on and install that lash. Just put a little blob of white glue or something like that, then I can touch it with a bit of matte varnish from the inside. So I'm going to switch this off a minute. I'm going to find the handrails, because they'll need to go on and be sprayed grey. This will need to be glued in place. Got to clean up the underside of that. At the same time, I'll spray the front of this deck another coat of that deck grey to try and get rid of those shiny patches. Then you can actually glue this deck on, and it looks like the model is getting somewhere. So I'll leave it at that, and then come back when we've got more to show. Whoops, I've just realised I've recorded a whole sequence there without turning the camera on, which is a bit silly. So where are we? Let's recap what we've done. So, hi. Not only did I forget to switch the camera on the last bit, when I've started re-recording, the footage has been corrupted a bit. I think it's because I'm using 4K rather than 1080p, so I'll go back to 1080p. But all I was saying was the little back deck's glued on. I'm not sure what the technical term for it is, but it's the deck below the flight deck. All the little fittings have been glued onto it, and I've just given them all a touch of the panel line wash to bring out any detail there is on them. That's all settled down, and now on to fitting the photo etch around the rear of the deck. Thank you. The handrails all come with, on this plastic coated photo etch sheet. So I was cutting the railing out by rocking a number 10 scalpel blade over the little tabs, slash through the plastic, lift it up, and then get the blade out, get the part out. All that you missed because I foolishly didn't turn on the camera, and it's gone a bit warped in the process, which I expected, so I'm not too bothered by that. We can straighten that up. So there's a little tab of mess there. So all I'm doing, put a hard bit of plastic so I don't distort the part, get my blade on that tab and just rock it, and it'll peel away. So next thing we need to do is figure out where this goes in real terms, and whether we need to put any sort of curve on it, and then we can paint it and get ready to glue it on. As I said before, these are very delicate but worth it. And if I was doing this again, looking at that, I probably would have done this before I put the back on. That's being wise after the event, because it is a bit of a struggle now, but we'll live. I'll probably do this off camera a little bit, because it's going to be quite awkward. Or is it? So looking at this, if I were to hold the hull on its side, we know this is here, or thereabouts. So we can actually use the hull as a former to bend that, or start the bending process. Start to get a bit of a curve in that. Let's see what it looks like when we drop it inside. Dropping bits of boat everywhere. This is why I didn't put that little set of stairs on till last, because you know I was going to be throwing this around like a maniac. That's not a million miles out now, actually. So yeah, use the hull as a former to get the shape. And then you just need to bend that last little bit and it should work out okay. So that's how she's going to go, and it doesn't look too bad at all. And it probably needs to come forward a bit because you're not going to see this side as much as you're going to see the back of it. So we need to bring it round so that'll fit there, but that works. Okay, we're not far off what we want to do with that. It probably just needs a little bit more of a curve. I know this is boring to watch, so I'll probably speed all this up when it comes to. Probably overcurved that a little bit now. I know you can't see any of this, but sorry, but I need to get this for me. Oh, I'm not far out on that at all. Except that it doesn't make sense for that hawser. Just check I'm getting this on the right side. Whoops, I've knocked that as well. So this is why you need to go slow. These little bits on the back, I glued them and I was on. I thought whatever I do, don't knock them. Then I've knocked one. So I think I'm going to do this one handrail, then walk away for the day. So these little bits set up so there's less danger of me knocking them off. Don't know what they are, but they do seem to be quite a prominent feature. And all the time I'm grabbing the back of this boat, my hands are all over that. Just do a bit more. And handrails are always going to be the hardest part of any model ship, to be honest, but they're the bit that, in my mind, make it. So let's. Nothing that's gone too far around realistically. I'll probably go with that. It's unfortunate the hardest handrails to do on this one, because they're the most curved, are the first ones you come across when you're building the kit. But we need to do a bit of straightening there because we're a bit wibbly wobbly. So that needs to come down a bit. That's relatively straight. It's not the best curve in the world, but we can live with that. Needs to come up a bit. Just a tweak. Top rails I can sort of beat up and down a bit to get into shape later on. It's just this. And don't worry, this is tedious to watch out, and this will be the only one I do on camera just so you can see the technique I use. So that's dropping in relatively okay. It needs to bend out a little bit more here. bit more curvy, so let's get something round. Best way to do a curve is on a curve, I guess. This is just a craft knife handle I've got, just to put a curve on that. If we get it round like that, we can then tweak it to make it fit, but we want a curve rather than a series of straight lines. Getting better every minute. Now this seems to flare out this way, so it needs a bit of a twist. That's not too bad actually. Not ideal. Don't know if you can see that at all on camera. We've got a handrail, we should roughly get a handrail. So I'm going to call that it on that one. And then I will come to spray these. Again, you won't see that on camera. Oh, I've knocked you as well. Better. You're all right. They're back in place-ish. I won't show me spraying these, it's a bit of a pain in the bum, but it'll be a coat of primer, then a coat of the ship grey. And what I'm going to do, which would seem more logical, to hold the bottoms where you're not going to see them, wire paint them, and then glue them on. But then it's quite awkward to touch up the paint if you're close to the deck, so I'm going to grab the top rail, which is the most prominent, to clamp them to spray, because that's quite easy to touch up with a paintbrush without getting paint where you don't want it to go. So that'll be the method there, but I think we're going to call that one it for that one. I'll jiggle it about a bit later on. I'll get the other ones done, we'll get them painted, get them glued in, and the deck will go on. Okay, so it's the last bit of this section of the destroyer until we get the deck on. Then we can start working on the superstructure. So I had a sort of semi-disaster last night. The little ladder that goes at the back there, it pinged out of my tweezers and I couldn't find it anywhere. Searched the floor, stood up, and it must have been on my shirt, because I saw it fall from my shirt and I was convinced I heard it land on the floor. So I was rooting around on the floor looking for it all night and this morning. I was about to give up and pop the deck on anyway, because you can't really see it. Look down and there it is on the mat there. So it must have come off my shirt and landed back pretty much where I originally picked it up from. So we're all right. We've got the little ladder back. I was going to build without it, so what you can see if it's inconsequential. So I'll get that on off camera so I can really concentrate. I can't afford to lose it again, and then we'll get the deck on. So I'll just get that in the tweezers and glued down. Okay, so the little ladder is in now, and it kind of sits forward from whatever those round cylinders are on the back. And it lines up with that little hatchway that's underneath there. Sorry, slowly up underneath there. So when the deck's on, jolt it. You can see there's a little ladder running up there now. So having that on just adds a little bit of detail to the back. The handrails, these ones I think are a bit iffy. That one's running downhill, but they're on, the ladder's on. We can put the deck on, seal it all up and forget about that. So for the deck, I'm going to just have a quick look for clamps. I think the F clamps I don't really like, might come in handy again, so let's have a look. Let's see, if these hold it, this will be what we're going to do. Ooh, that's part of a different kit that I'm building. We'll talk about that a bit later on. So this, and once the deck's clamped on, I can start to put things like the propeller tubes and the rudders on, because we don't need to get into these areas. So is that holding that firmly? Not very. That's what I mean by these. They seem good. So you actually want to clamp something, then you realise there's a piece of poo. Okay, that's holding the back down. That can hold that down. Actually, this might work. That can hold the bow down. I'll go with that. It's just raised it slightly on the bow. So we're just dry fitting this at first, and we'll come and do it properly later on. I don't really want to. I'm not quite getting that clamping pressure on the bow I would like. I think there might be another bit to glue on that as well. Check the instructions later on. That's not really giving me the force I want there. And this is why I say do all this before you do anything fancy with rudder tubes and things, because you're not going to be able to do this and keep an eye on the underside of the boat. That'll hold the front down, and I've got a feeling that a bit of springiness in the deck there, we might be better off being cunning and using the superstructure. Got all the bits off it so we don't damage it. Obviously I'll have to move that lollipop stick. You have to think these things through, and then we'll put some glue on and see how we get on with this. Because this is a nice rigid structure that sits right in the middle of it, so we get a clamp across that, it'll hold a lot of area down quite nicely. So that's going to hold that down. So we need to worry about the stern and the bow now, don't we? So the bow, we found that seemed to work, but it's a bit long, so let's do something about that. That should force that part of the deck into place, which it has. We just check the stern's working. If the stern's working, we'll put some glue on this and get this thing down. So if we get a nice line on the stern, just check it all lines up as good as it's going to. Get me ferret scout car out the way. I shouldn't have two projects in the go, it's just a bit silly, but okay, so we know that's all going to fit into place quite well. There's that bit raised. Potentially I might have to get another, or move this clamp over, I suppose. Let's see if we can do that. Yeah, it's got that down. So that's where we need to clamp it. So a little bit of goop there, just behind the funnel, so we can take it all apart again. And obviously it's not going to work out when we do it, everything will shift round, it'll be a dog's dinner, but that's what we come to expect the way I build models. So that's there. That's there. Come on, up you pop. That's there. And then let's have a look. When I gazed at this the other day, there's these little ridges here all the way along, and I think we can probably put some of this contactor on here, and that should hold it without oozing out onto the deck, because we don't want it to ooze out above, we want it to stay where it is. So I'm going to be doing that. I'm hoping that that's enough to hold her down, rather than I have to put a bit there and a bit there. What we don't want is that to ooze out above and ruin the paint. Well, we don't mind if it ruins the paint on the deck in a way, we just want to get it on, but I'd rather it didn't. So that, hopefully, with a bit of a slide. And we have to be careful we don't get paint oozing out onto the clamps, because that bit of foam on it will degenerate with glue. That's not how I want it. And that contact here does give us a little bit more, that's down, bit more setting time, which is one of the reasons we're going for it on this. So then we had another clamp around here, didn't we? That seems to have gripped that down. We had a bit of the superstructure on. Ooh. So we'll put that. It was just this side of the funnel, I think, wasn't it? That should snug that down. Now I'm hoping this will stick. Time will tell, I suppose. But what we haven't got is any usage over the deck, so we've still got that nice crisp grey line going all the way around where the hull rolls over onto the grey deck plates, which is the bit I was keen on keeping, so I didn't have to reinstate that. Obviously this area of the deck will be grey, so I've got to mask some of it and spray it, but I didn't really want to get too involved with that really narrow line, because that's quite a prominent feature. So that all seems to be down. Hopefully I was right and the deck sits far enough down onto those little ridges so it catches. There's a small bit of glue oozing out there, which kind of indicates I'm right that that will pull down. If we have to glue any more, I'll just touch extra thin around those edges, but I used that because it's got a longer setting time, so it gives us a chance to sort of wiggle it around. Had we used the extra thin on those ridges, it'd be dry in places by now. So I'm about to do something I'm not very good at and just walk away and leave this for a good couple of hours, and then we'll see if it's set. So if that's done, the next plan is glue on rudders and various bits and pieces on the back, then paint the black boot stripe, then the red underside. One thing I'll check before I do that is how well this sits without clamping, because if this superstructure doesn't sit well without clamping, then I might leave everything off on the hull till we're ready to glue that superstructure part of the superstructure on. Then roll it over to the one. Then if I ever decide I need to clamp that down, I'm not risking damaging anything on the underside of it, but we'll see when we go, and hopefully that'll just sit on there nicely without any gaps. But we'll come back when it's set, then if everything goes to plan, we'll be working on this area of the superstructure independently, then the bits that go on it independently, then we'll just drop this on as a whole unit, and then we'll worry about weathering and rigging when it's all together. So I'll leave that for now, and I'll see you soon.